Good morning.
Oh, sorry. You caught me contemplating the mysteries of the cosmos.
And if you're wondering which of us is which, you can look just below at our little identifiers since we look so similar today. Shirt, beard, glasses.
Yeah.
Well, we're just one and the same now.
Well,
But
yeah.
welcome to Digital
We've
Devotionals.
we've amalgamated.
We're slowly becoming one. Was it
Well,
the Borg?
you
Become
know,
a part of the collective.
resistance is futile. You will be assimilated.
There
Um,
we go. That's
so
enough nerding
welcome.
for today.
Welcome to Digital Devotions. I'm Pastor Tom Brown of Cooper Memorial and Prairie Village United Methodist Churches.
And
And this
I'm
is
Pastor Craig Taylor of Scottsville First United Methodist Church down in Allen County, Kentucky. Welcome.
I think it's Allen County.
Allen, please.
Allen County.
But the county south of us or the city south of us in Tennessee is Lafayette.
Yeah,
Not
Lafayette. That's
Lafayette,
true.
or not Lafayette. It's Lafayette.
Yeah, it's Lafayette. That's how you say it.
Please, it is Lafayette. Use the correct English. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about the Bible, of which we can definitely nerd out with as well and do syntax and grammar and literary analysis. But before we get there, we want to thank you for being with us today and jumping on this midday devotional. If you're joining with us later, we thank you for watching as well, and we hope you glean something out of this today. If you have comments, please put them in our chat window so we can address them as they come. And even if you're watching this later, we watch the comments. So if you have questions, please put them in and we'll respond as we're able. Where are we at today, Tom?
We are in chapter 39 of the book of Genesis. So
I thought he was going to run with it and say like Kentucky.
No.
In God's house.
As we know, you're the Joker. I'm the straight man who brings you bring the comedic relief, but I bring the contrast that heightens it. That's how we work.
I literally intended to dress like Tom today. So
if I had known, I would have put a polo shirt and some shorts on, and it would have been fine.
No one would have seen the shorts.
Yeah. But I would know, and they would know.
That's true. Well, as you said, we're in chapter 39, continuing Joseph's story, or coming back to Joseph's story.
Yeah. Well, would you like to pray? You want me to pray?
I could pray. If you can read our scripture for today, we'll go that way. Would you join us in prayer today, wherever you are gathered? Almighty God, we give thanks for the change of the season. That even after the rounds of rain, we can see your beauty in the change of the leaves, the crisp of the air, and the cool of the wind. Even if we aren't fall people or winter people, we can find recognition in the beauty that seasons change, and so too does our relationship with you, but it grows ever new, and there is renewing that comes within our heart. We pray for all of those that are experiencing the effects of COVID right now, whether they're in body or in their families, that they may be healed and receive a measure of your comfort and strength today, and that we as your church, wherever we are gathered, may do the work you called us to. And today that work and this time is reflection. It is the work of your word, and it's the work of devotion that we might improve our relationship with you, gain new understanding, and encourage ourselves and others to take those next steps in our relationship. We pray all of this in your heavenly Son, Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
We'll take us away, Tom.
I will take us away. We are going to be in chapter 39 of the book of Genesis. This is a passage you've probably heard before if you've been around very much, or if you watched the musical Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat from about 10 years ago, something like that. And so let's gather together in Genesis chapter 39, and we're going to read the whole chapter just to get the whole story in mind. Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight, and attended him, and made him overseer of his house, and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time he had made him overseer in his house over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance, and after a time his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me my master has no concern about anything in his house, and he has put everything he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And just as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie down beside her or be with her. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house were there, she caught him by his garment and said, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. As soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled out of the house, she called to the men of her household and said, "See, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. He came in to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried out, he left his garment beside me and fled and got out of the house." And then she laid up his garment by her until her master came home. She told him the same story, saying, "That Hebrew servant whom you brought among us came in to laugh at me. But as soon as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment beside me and fled out of the house." As soon as his master heard the word that his wives spoke to him, "This is the way your servant treated me," his anger was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him steadfast love, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God. There's a lot of literary and syntactical and reflexive juiciness in this passage, which I know Tom wants to talk about deeply. So,
yes, I can't wait.
I mean, I do as well, but I know Tom well enough that he wants to talk about words.
Well, and so let's first do a little historical background about Egypt at this time. So Egypt, if you've studied the ancient world really at all, Egypt is the dominant superpower of the ancient Near East, all the way up until around the time of Alexander the Great, by about the 300s BCE. So Egypt was a world power. They were incredibly successful as a civilization, inventing writing, having a sustainable agricultural system built out of the Nile River Delta.
Built into the Fertile Crescent area, they had a very rhythmic way of life that
Absolutely.
could fertilize fields through the Nile flooding, that limited natural disasters, and that kept many of the issues like drought at bay, which then come to plague them later on. But in that earlier years of the kingdom's reign, it was very cyclical and seasonal, and you didn't have to worry too much about these upsetting forces that might destroy other civilizations.
Another thing to keep in mind is that the Egyptians were generally farmers, where the Hebrews and other Canaanite groups were largely herdsmen. And so the Hebrews, the family of Abraham, and their extended families were largely pastoral, versus the Egyptians, who were largely agricultural. And so they're largely going to be focused on growing crops.
Pastoral meaning pasture land.
Yes, yeah, not pastoral as in like blessed be the Father. So this is going to make the Egyptians a totally distinct culture from the other Canaanites. The Egyptians have their own way of doing things, their own culture, their own language. It's very different from the diffused Canaanites, who are all sort of separated into individual city-states. The Egyptians are going to have one sort of king figure, the Pharaoh, who is what we would term now a god king. Pharaoh is a semi-divine being who sits at the crux between the mortal realm and the realm of the gods, and serves as this sort of delineation between the divine and the mundane. And so that was sort of the way their culture worked. But it's also important to take a moment and recognize the Egyptians of Genesis aren't real Egyptians. The Egyptians of Genesis, the Egyptians that Joseph interacts with, are a different subgroup called the Hyksos, who invaded Egypt around this time period and defeated the real Egyptians and sent them up the Nile. And so
Upper
by
kingdom and the lower kingdom.
the upper and the
You'll
lower
hear
kingdom.
that refer to.
Yeah.
There's two kingdoms in Israel later on too, but when referring to Egypt, there's upper kingdom and lower kingdom because of this incident.
Yeah. And so the people that Joseph is interacting with aren't the real Egyptians. They're a group of people who came in and took over Egypt and then decided the Egyptians' culture was so good, we'll just be the Egyptians now. And that's going to lead into the book of Exodus. By the time the book of Exodus rolls around, the real Egyptians have come back in and have taken control. And that's going to lead to the conflict between the Egyptians and the Israelites. But in this instance, Joseph is interacting with a group of people who are the Hyksos. And they're a different group than traditional Egyptians that we would think of today. The other thing that I would note here is the parallels with Joseph and Jacob. Joseph, is taken into a foreign country. Jacob flees into his in-laws' country, but both end up in a sort of unwilling servitude, but both are very successful in their unwilling servitude. Jacob is incredibly successful as the head of the shepherds for his father-in-law Laban. Joseph is incredibly successful as the head of
these repetitive patterns develop in terms of the description of the stories of those that will be the heads of the Israelite family as it develops. But as well, we also have that reflexive nature even within the passage itself. We have a clear distinction of the first part of the passage, an unwilling servitude, the middle part, and he was blessed. Then we have a fall again, and then unwilling servitude, and he was blessed. Even within the passage, we have this reflexive work of narrative that ends up repeating itself.
Yeah. The other thing I will note here quickly is that the role of God is sort of passive in this passage. When we dealt with Jacob and God are going to like see each other in dreams, and Jacob's going to wrestle with the angel of death. Joseph isn't going to have those same sort of interactions. His interactions with God are more passive. God giving this oracle through a dream, God blessing him, but in a passive way, rather than God being present to sort of say, I've given you the blessing of Abraham. Joseph is sort of successful because of God, but there's there's some space between God and Joseph that is interesting. You don't see that present in the patriarch.
Like Esther's story, where God is very much present in the situation in terms of blessing and support. Joseph does have actual reference to God, but it's like saying, how could I do this offense to God? But it's still in the interaction one-on-one with someone else in the story. It's not a direct, blessing straight from heaven or interaction with God in a dream. And Joseph does receive the dreams, as we will see, but again, no direct quote unquote interaction. So we kind of have this change in the function of story of how God interacts. And so, that's a lot of good background for us, Tom. Thank you.
Hey, that's what I'm here for. You do the tech stuff. I do the research.
Well, and if you just hit verse 1, it describes Joseph's master who buys him Potiphar, a courtier of Pharaoh, a high chamberlain, an Egyptian man. Why would you have to say Egyptian man if he was in Egypt? And it most likely is because he actually was an Egyptian man in the lower kingdom, which would not have been a lot of people. But, they might have kept a lot of those people of the court that they captured and said, hey, we could still use you. We like what you were doing. If you could be for the next dynasty here, maybe we'll make a pyramid for you.
No, I don't think that's how it works.
No, but it helps to explain some of the
Yes.
eccentricities
Yeah.
here. Why would they have to say an Egyptian man?
Yep.
And so we get a lot more background because of that on Potiphar. He
Mhm.
is kind of between two cultures here. Well, the
Yeah.
same culture, just copy and pasted. Control V, put over here.
Yes. Yeah. He's an Egyptian man living in Egypt that is occupied.
He is serving much as Daniel does, except
Yes.
he didn't get expelled.
Yeah.
The whole nation just said, we're going to drop onto where you are and kick everybody out. But he's serving in someone else's court,
Yeah.
in many respects. But then the references between master and slave or master and servant,
Yeah.
depending on your translation, the master-slave language is probably more accurate to the Hebrew relationship here. But every time that it references, again, we're not going to be using the word Potiphar ever again.
No.
In this, it's always going to be when Joseph is talking, master. But when Potiphar's wife is talking, it's always he after this. She doesn't even use his name. So the story very quickly shifts away from Potiphar as being the central locus of control, but in reference to the master-slave relationship, which is master-slave, a hierarchy, we then have very clear references and words to the whole house, all that I have, for everything within my domain. And so this master relationship to slave relationship keeps getting imbalanced.
Yep.
Because every time we reference it, it's saying, yes, Potiphar's master, but Joseph was in charge of all. Joseph was in charge of the house. Joseph made sure everything was kept, and the Lord blessed him. So we see that there is this almost equality in power dynamic, even though there is an imbalance in structural relationship.
Yes. That is so key, I think, to the Joseph story. It goes back to Joseph's dreams, this dream of authority. Everywhere that Joseph goes, he ends up in that, like you said, imbalance.
I'm going to rule over you, even though I'm under you.
Yep.
And then eventually, master catches up and says, hey, this is too far. Knock you back down, Joseph.
Yep.
So here, Joseph at least has a little more humility.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, we saw that with Jacob. Jacob's response was, who am I to bow before you, my son? Yeah. So again, we're seeing a lot of those same patterns being played out. And spoiler alert, it's going to play out again. This isn't the last time we're going to deal with this.
Joseph's story, this happens a couple times.
Yes.
He tries to say, I'm going to rule over my brothers. Knocked into a hole, literally. Knocked down. I'm going to rule over this household. Well, then come play with me, which is another reference to Potiphar's wife's seduction. She says, lie with me here in verse 7. If we want to jump forward here.
I was going to do that. I thought, let's talk about the housewife of Egypt. And so
we've left the Potiphar relationship. Now we're with the housewife. It says, and Joseph was comely in features and comely to look at.
Well, and so I will take a moment.
Reflexive.
He's described as his mother is.
His mother, yes. Yeah. It's the exact description as his mother was described. So again, we're still calling back this reflexive nature of everything that's happening. And then Potiphar's wife, says, well, if you're within the household, then I should have you. And it says, lie with me. It's three words is all she says in terms of this sexual advance. And in response, Joseph gives like 27 words. I can't remember. He has like 4 sentences of response.
Yeah.
Like, how dare you? Let me explain how offensive. I don't think you get this. It's not just no.
Yeah. Her wording changes. It starts with sort of very aggressive and very forward. Lie with me. It's a command. To a sort of passive, like she continues to keep this up, but it's very, very sort of passive. And then it boils over, into the very aggressive act of what is essentially assault.
And she seized him by the garment and said, come lie with me. Again, that it's a command, is that phrase there. So, but Joseph in the first instance, where it's lie with me, and you have a separation between distance here. Joseph says, no, I've been given in charge of everything. I could. Yeah, I've been given charge of everything. But what offense would that be to not only my master, but to my God? I've got higher moral standards than this lady. I mean,
that's
also
fair.
doesn't have humility.
Yeah.
There's a little, you can see a little bit of his hubris coming through there, even though he's servant. I'm servant of all.
Well, I love that
big
language
little
there.
dog.
He's like, no, I could. My master's put me in charge of everything, but I'm not going to.
He is not greater in this house than I. You have your master and then Joseph, but Joseph's overall. It's that imbalance of power dynamic, and Joseph knows it. He is not greater than me. Yeah, I'm servant, but I'm servant overall, and I can tank this household if I want to. I'll make some risky investments. I know about some pyramid schemes. Let's go invest in limestone block. It's gonna be the next Nile Delta grain point. But he says it. If I wanted to, I could.
Yeah.
Potiphar ain't nothing. Here's Joseph. I'm gonna get a little taller. Haha. Come on, Potiphar.
Yeah.
So he even says it. I could if I wanted to.
I wanted to. I could do it.
I have a higher moral recognition, one for Potiphar, but more than that, this is the reference for God. Yeah. So it happens again. She takes the different tactic. The wording here saying, come lie with me, literally means that she's kind of trying to say, come lie down next to me. Yeah. Again, it's a command that
it goes from aggressive to sort of a passive invitation. Come lie with me. Just come lie here next to me and keep me warm.
He's responsive because he has to follow the commands. Obviously, the lie with me initial command is sexual, and he's like, no, I can't do that. That's against the actual head honcho. Can't do it. Come lie next to me. Come lie down with me. I was like, okay, I guess I have to. And then the term garment here becomes very important because we're already dealing with Joseph is all about the clothing. This is all about the clothing.
Well,
and so we have the garment that he wore from his father. That was also a unisex garment that was like for princesses, basically. It's a very flashy unisex garment saying, look at me, ain't I pretty? And so this is a different garment. This is interesting. It's a very generic term, but it's definitely not outer garment. There's multiple layers.
This garment here is a sign of authority. It's a sign of his status. And so this is one of those, it's not his underpants. No. What all the research that I've
King James says loincloth. That is too far. This is not underwear.
No. It's not his undies.
But it's not an outer coat that you'd wear out in public. It's the undershirt.
This is a tunic that he wears that demonstrates that he is sort of the chief of the house, the head of the slaves. And so in the stripping of this garment, we're seeing an ironic foreshadowing of what's about to come.
What comes as well with that, since it's not the full outer garment, it's not the full outer garment, it's kind of a slight underlayment. He almost assuredly, he has to leave his garment.
Yeah.
So the implication in why Potiphar believes his wife is that, well, it's identified. This isn't just anybody's garment. This is Joseph's garment. This was the chief of the house slave garment. But also, you're in your underwear at least if this garment's gone. The only way this comes off is if you came out of it. So then you're now exposed.
Yep.
So, one, you get the image of Joseph running around the house in his tidy whities.
There's the loincloth. He's got one. Yeah.
But this is also for Potiphar, like finding a trail of clothes on the stairs.
Yeah.
It's very indicative of like, you don't get down to this level of clothing unless something happened.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we have that recognition that then Potiphar takes his wife's side and again rebalances the relationship, and Joseph goes back down the ladder.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's what we have to deal with the word garment. Well, it's generic, it's specific, but it's not outer, but it's not. It's a whole deal. But yeah, Joseph's all about the clothing.
Well, the clothes make the man.
The clothes
define
the man.
Yeah, for Joseph, the clothes make the man. What he wears is an indication of who he is, and we see that in the rainbow tunic that his father gives him. That's sort of this princess dress that he's given, and then the chief of slaves garment he's going to wear. Again, Pharaoh later on is going to give him garments as well. Spoiler alert if you haven't read the story.
Clothes are important.
Clothes are important. They're a sign of distinction.
I turned the labels off. I don't know. Oh, he put his glasses back. I say, who's Tom? Because who's Tom? Who's Craig? I don't know. The clothes are too similar.
Thankfully, my beard isn't quite as red as yours. Mine is more black. So
it's more of lighting. That's a lighting issue. You just need to get more lighting. But yeah, so we have this indication that it's created here, and then we move because of this clothing incident. That we go into our second point of reflexive work. So, hey, I'm putting you in the dungeons, man. Get out of here.
Well, there's those reflective moments. He's not executed. He's imprisoned, just like with his brothers.
But he could have been
killed. Yeah.
Let's kill you. Oh, okay. We'll make some money off you.
Again, it's interesting. It's interesting that he's not just executed. Potiphar has every right to go ahead and do that. Instead, he's put into prison, and that's the reflection of his brothers. He can't escape this cycle of imprisonment. But in imprisonment, he's going to rise.
Now we have the prison warden, and he becomes the prison house keeper. I don't even know the true word for this. The house prison slave. I'm sure there's an actual term for it, but there's not a good English translation for this.
One other thing I would say is that this is not a normal prison. Don't think of this as like, chains hanging from the ceiling and dirty piles of straw.
Monty Python.
Pharaoh's
all
prison.
I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, this is a royal prison. And so this is a more comfortable kind of prison. It's to house nobles.
Blue collar.
Yeah, this is white collar prison. They get like 4 hours of TV time. And so, interestingly, I would note, it's strange that Potiphar would send him a slave to royal prison. And it could denote that Potiphar maybe understands more about the situation than face value.
Hey, I have to make a response because of what it said, but we go back and there's a great deal of trust that Potiphar has placed into his hands. And so obviously he trusts him with the entirety of his household, which, that's basically, you can consider that investments. Potiphar has his work, but then he's put his money into all these things. Joseph is he's the manager of his entire estate. So if Potiphar is, into textiles, Joseph's managing that. He's managing the businesses that aren't Potiphar's role in the court, which undoubtedly he has, or at least he has control of. And so you look at that amount of trust for someone to take a foreign-born slave into their household and give them this, that is and beyond a traditional level of trust that we would see even in other stories in this time. So yeah, there probably is more understanding here. And also the output. Not only does he trust him, and Joseph was blessed. And so Potiphar was blessed, just like we see with his father when he's serving in his father-in-law's household. So obviously, not only is there trust, but from this trust, Potiphar is like, man, I'm getting all the reward here.
Doesn't have to think about anything but what he's going to eat.
Since we're not talking directly to God in this passage, we can infer, though, that maybe that's a part of the relationship when Potiphar sends Joseph away. It's like, there might be something going on here with why I become so blessed because of this slave. Maybe killing him's too far, and I don't want to incur wrath of something.
I read
skepticism.
it. Yeah, I kind of read it as a, that Potiphar may understand the real situation here, but there's a saving face that has to take place. And so Joseph is sent to the nice prison. He's sent to the nice prison rather than being executed, rather than being whipped and left out in the sun, which is what you do to slaves. All this is guessing.
This is between the lines work.
Yeah, this is Talmud work. This is work for interpreters This is not in the text itself, but I just find it interesting. Like,
helps lead us in understanding, the situation that it's in. But for whatever reason, Potiphar, who is only called master at this point, sends Joseph to the nice, cushy prison.
Yep.
Which also gives us reference to what happens later on.
Mm-hmm.
In a future story, we see that the prison warden takes him and gives everything into his hands in the prison. And all that they were to do there, it was he who did it. So now there is a slave in charge of the prison.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I trust you. You're not going to run away. Here's the keys. Dingle, jangle, jangle. I mean, we see other prison instances where God, swings open the gates. Here, God gives. Here's the prison. It's yours now.
It's yours now. Yeah. Well,
very interesting prison episodes.
Yeah, and to kind of move into the devotional aspect of this, like, I find it so interesting. Joseph is kind of a young punk. We get that. He starts off the story kind of a young punk. But one of the things we quickly discover about Joseph is that he does have this sort of moral core. And I love that statement he says to Potiphar's wife, look, I could tank this whole thing. I could take you right here. He's giving me everything, but I'm not going
to. If I wanted to, I could.
But I'm not going to, because that would be an abuse of power.
If I wanted to, I could, punky. But come on.
Yeah.
What about your husband? What about God? We're not going to offend these people. Come on.
Exactly.
I'm not saying you're not beautiful, but
that's
no,
part of him. Yeah.
Never gonna happen.
And so, ending up in the prison, we see a similar thing happen. The moral core of Joseph, he's given basically the keys to the prison, but he doesn't run away. His father would have run away.
Yes, he would have. But it cements the movement of Joseph's narrative into the position he needs to be in. While he has the dream of I will rule over you in the beginning, he's young. He doesn't know yet how to interpret all the dreams that are given to him. And when he does, in the first instance with his brothers, he just pisses everybody off and makes them want to kill him. It's like, maybe I should interpret dreams a little more appropriately and tell only what's needed about them. And so we see his young naivete, his hubris, because his father loves him so much, gets him into trouble.
Yeah.
And because of that, he moves away. We see that growth through Potiphar's house.
Yeah.
But still, there's probably a way he could have dealt with Potiphar's wife that wouldn't have gotten him thrown out. If he'd been smarter, if he hadn't been as young, or if he hadn't been so full of himself, like, everything in this house is mine, I'm good.
Yeah.
I don't want to offend anybody, but
yeah.
he didn't think there was a situation he could put himself in that would get him in trouble. So again,
it's the Ned Stark growing. It's the Ned Stark problem. He's got that moral core, but he doesn't know how to play the game. He's not wise enough to actually do anything.
This is Joseph leveling up. He's like, oh, I got to keep working the ladder here. And he ends up now in the prison, which directly connects him to Pharaoh's house now, because it's Pharaoh's prison. So when Pharaoh has an issue, there's this man that we can go to that we're going to find out about. And so because of that, we now get that link in the story from Joseph and his family to this powerful nation state in the region that can make a change happen. So Joseph's been moved into a position where now he truly is going to be in fulfillment of this dream that he had in the beginning, but he just really didn't know how to interpret fully yet. He thought, just my family. And God said so much more.
Well, and one of the interesting things, and even Jacob at some point is going to talk about this, that God is interwoven. God is moving in this story, even if God is, we're never explicitly said, and God came down and told Joseph, do this thing, and God moved the heavens and the earth and parted the waters. God is moving in this story, even though we can't see it. And oftentimes God is moving through Joseph's actions. Joseph has this moral core in him that's allowing him to serve so effectively that he's going to end up in the places he needs to be. It just makes me think about how so very often we want God to be this outstanding presence. We want God to appear as fire and smoke and to answer our questions, but so often God is interwoven in our stories.
If God had fulfilled the desires in that moment when Joseph had the first dream, okay, put me in power, Joseph's not ready yet. Joseph doesn't have the experience. Joseph doesn't have the humility that we're going to see from him. And even once he's in power, he still has more growth left to do.
Yeah.
If this, just fix it now, God, issue would come about to fulfill my want right now, Joseph would have sucked to be in charge of. If he was punky kid in charge, I got dreams and I can dream dreams and interpret them. Woohoo! Put me in charge. No one would want to be under Joseph's rule.
No, that'd be bad. Yeah.
And so this path that God is working through Joseph's actions is allowing Joseph the time to grow, to actually be able to use his gift effectively instead of just in his own eyes.
Yeah. And Joseph's going to go through some suffering too. It's not like, oh, Joseph dreams dreams and God has blessed him, and so he's just going to go right up the ladder, no problems. No, Joseph's going to get sold into slavery by his brothers and thrown into prison by the Egyptians. He's going to go through some things. And again, it makes me think in our own lives how often we want that smooth path. We want God to level the path for us, easy going.
It's swirls and dips, and there's valleys and mountains, and there's rocks, and there's thieves, and there's broken bones.
God has never once said,
easy.
Follow me and everything's gonna be great. You'll be healthy, wealthy, and wise just because you followed me. That's not how it works. You got to go
through the narrow gate. Go through the hard gate.
Yeah.
Go through the intentional path, which isn't going to be the easily paved one. And so we see that, reflected very well in Joseph's story.
Yeah.
And probably our own.
Yeah. But what makes Joseph so interesting is in the midst of all of these things, Joseph doesn't turn off. He doesn't say, well, you know what? Screw it. My family turned on me. This didn't work out. I'm just going to burn the whole thing down. No, he stays true to himself. Mm-hmm. He's got to grow into it.
That core.
That core of who he
is growing and becoming smarter and wiser. That's, I think, the big word here is Joseph, through these experiences, gains wisdom. Yeah. He could just become hardened, which is a word that's going to reference to Pharaoh later on. In terms of Pharaoh and future actions with Moses, he could gain more wisdom from the interactions with God and the Israelites, the Hebrews, when he has these moments where actions are occurring. But Pharaoh chooses to have that, well, everybody's against me, I'm just going to be angry effect, right? He refuses to gain experience and wisdom.
Yeah.
And here we see at the beginning of this Egyptian story, the lower kingdom story.
The lower kingdom.
That we see Joseph having these experiences, which could be viewed as entirely negative, and saying there's something to be gained from this. Mm-hmm. I can grow in this. God can still use me in this.
Yeah.
I'm not done yet.
Yeah.
He turns up rather than turns off.
I like that. Yeah. He turns up rather than turns off. That's a good one. We'll put that on a t-shirt.
Turn it up rather than turn it off. Mm-hmm. And that's I think maybe my point where I would turn this in devotional work is it's so easy, especially in reference to the pandemic that we've gone through, and I'm not saying you don't get home and, I just need to unplug from the world. That's fine. But we more easily come into a place where we'd rather turn off from a situation that's negative, turn off from people that may need our help, then turn on and look beyond the situation to where God may be moving in it. It might be negative for the moment, yes. But we are placed here for a reason.
Absolutely.
How can this situation, maybe this situation isn't redeemable. maybe this just sucks right now, but that doesn't mean it's the end of the story.
Absolutely. Yeah. Where you are right now does not necessarily mean that's where you're going to stay forever.
So we got choices. We can turn it off.
Yeah.
Or we can turn up and look to God and say, how can I move forward? Yeah, it sucks. It sucks. God, man. Slavery sucks. Potiphar's wife, man, how could she do that to me? My own brothers, my own family, how could they do that to me? But I believe there's something beyond this moment.
There you go. That'll preach.
So. I think we finished 39 today then.
Well, it only took us 40 minutes, so we're a little over. We're grateful that you've stuck with us this long. We hope it's been informative. We hope it's helped you in some way. We hope that you learned something from all this.
And as always, I'm Pastor Tom Brown, and that's Pastor Craig Taylor. And since we look so similar,
Where?
I left the graphics on.
There you go.
I'm Pastor Craig, and that's Pastor Tom, and we're grateful that you could be with us.
Yes.
We would ask you to do our 3 favorite things, which are go to Dairy Queen, Taco Bell, and McDonald's. Oh, wait, no, that was wrong. Tom, you remember what it is. What are we supposed to do?
Turn me off. Yeah. We want you to like this video. Take a moment, press that like button. That's going to help the algorithm that Facebook uses to get this message moving. We want you to share the video. Again, you've heard something cool today. We hope that there's somebody out there that's a part of your family circle or your life circle who needs to hear the good news. Maybe they're having a hard time. Maybe they're stuck in prison, metaphorical or realistic. Or literal, yeah. And they need to hear something exciting. They need to hear that it's not over yet. Send them this message or share this message to your Facebook page. Maybe this is something somebody needs to hear. And we want you to comment. We want to hear from you. This is not us speaking into the void. If you're a part of our congregations, we want to hear from you. If you're not a part of our congregations, well, we're Wesleyans, and so the world is our congregation. So you're still a part of this thing too. We want to hear from you. We want to hear how you're feeling, how you're doing, how the story is impacting you.
And we'll see you again next week at 11 Central, 12 Eastern. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a blessed rest of your week.